I farm in Lynn County. I raise, we cut hay. Some of it's going for export. Some of it domestically. We raise pigs. We raise other livestock, and sometimes we do vegetables as well. We started to get involved in the issue, this issue of genetic engineering, primarily because there were groups at the Oregon legislature that were trying to ban local communities from having these discussions. There was a bill that specifically was meant to stop an effort in Jackson County that was led by local farmers from actually regulating genetically engineered crops. The reason why they wanted to do it down there is because there were multinational companies growing genetically engineered sugar beet seed under contract with no warning for their neighbors, which actually posed a very real economic risk to farmers down there. They wanted to do a local effort led by local citizens to determine their future of their agriculture and food system.
My 3 boys came down with these conditions, and they don't run in my family. I was perfectly healthy growing up. I didn't take more than a couple of aspirin growing up. My husband, same story, very healthy. We checked our entire family histories, nothing. So I thought, well, this is really weird. So once I got a handle on what was going on with my children, which cost thousands of dollars, and we had to go to many, many doctors for them to figure out what was going on. Once they got better, I wanted to look into diet as a way of bolstering their immune system and to make them stronger and less likely to have problems again. And when I started looking into our farming practices in the US, I learned about GMOs. And I was pretty horrified as a mother of children who have a health condition, because I want them to have the cleanest food possible. And when I learned about the way they make GMOs, that was the moment that I decided to really do something about this and get out and talk to people about it. I'm just a mom, I'm not a professional, nobody's paying me. I'm doing this because I want all of you to learn about what GMOs are.
I come to this as a farm worker, as a child of farm workers. My parents came from Mexico and Colorado, and they were sprayed with pesticides all the time. I started working in the fields when I was 11 years of age and was sprayed with pesticide. We didn't know what pesticides would do to us. So we'd be working, and the planes would come over, those two-wing planes would come over, and they'd spray us, and we didn't know, or they'd spray an hour before we went to work. And it's not till later that we start finding out what the pesticides really do to us. I was working for an organization called United Farm Workers Union in California with Cesar Chavez. And yeah, a lot of you know it. You supported the grape and lettuce boycott. When I was much younger and slimmer, I was a lettuce worker. I could bend over and cut the lettuce and pack it, properly. But Cesar Chavez, who has he had an 8th grade education, he started looking in McFarland and Delano in the San Joaquin Valley, where we started having cancer clusters in the mid-'80s. And this is after we had banned DDT in our farm worker contracts. We're the first group, we beat the EPA to ban DDT. And we had a lot of support from consumers who helped us put the pressure on companies to get contracts for farm workers. But Cesar said we have to go one step further. We found kids having deformities, a lot of cancer, families being ruined because of pesticides and herbicides. So he went on a 36-day fast with water only in 1988.
The federal and state oversight system for genetically engineered crops is extremely lax. Whether it's in the experimental testing phase, there's been widespread problems of crops leaving the site where they were supposed to be heavily regulated and tested and outcrossing with non-genetically engineered crops. There have been huge examples where once crops are commercialized, and I'll use the term that the United States Department of Agriculture uses, deregulated, which means no regulation. Once they're deregulated, there's really nobody tracking. There's nobody monitoring where the crops are grown, how much of them are in any particular state. We now know that there have been about 431 sites where genetically engineered crops have been tested in Oregon. All we really know about is the county and the crop. We have no idea how much genetically engineered deregulated crops are being grown in the state right now. That said, I can tell you that Oregon is not a GMO crop state. We don't produce the big commodities like cotton and soy. In fact, I don't think there's a single soy or cotton grower in this state. Those are two of the big ones in terms of high percentage of genetic engineering. The reality is we're not really, this isn't something that farmers in Oregon are really invested in like they are in the Midwest. So I just want to put that out there. A lot of our big crops like hazelnuts, berries, pears, and the fresh market vegetables, the ones that are for human consumption, don't even have a genetically engineered counterpart. Wheat is another example where there's obviously some wheat in testing. There's been huge problems, but our wheat producers aren't growing GMO wheat. So this is the kind of thing where we can kind of distinguish Oregon farm products in the marketplace by the fact that they are typically not genetically engineered. We grow over 200 different kinds of crops, and most all of them are not genetically engineered in this state.
The seeds are already treated with a seed treatment. The farmer has to buy this when he buys the product. So instead of having the natural seed, right, they get the seeds with the seed treatment. This has fungicide on it, right, and neonicotinoids, and it's already treated with certain chemicals, and that's why it's this color. It's a warning that it's poison. They are warned on the bag, do not touch this, and they plant it without touching it. These are already toxic. As the plant grows, it grows through these chemicals, and it gets the fungicide and the neonicotinoid throughout the plant. Okay, so that's when it starts to grow. Then it's sprayed with Roundup. Roundup normally kills all kinds of plants. It's non-selective, meaning it's an insecticide that kills all kinds of plants, except these lab-created plants. Their special version doesn't die. Everything around it dies. So it's convenient weeding. I call it spray and go farming, because the farmers, all they have to do is spray and all the other weeds disappear and their plant keeps growing. But it's been soaked in this Roundup, and it's made to absorb the Roundup and not die. The way Roundup works is, if it touches even the tiniest corner of an outside leaf, it goes throughout the plant, throughout every cell, throughout the food, down the stalk, through the roots, and into the dirt. It is made to do that. It touches any part and it goes all the way through. That's called systemic. It's a systemic herbicide. So when you're eating this food, you are consuming amounts of Roundup or glyphosate. Glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup. Roundup is actually 125 times more potent than just glyphosate. Glyphosate is the only thing that's been tested. They've never tested the formulation of Roundup. There is one scientist who has tested Roundup as a total formulation. His name is Seralini, and he's the one that found out it was 125 times more toxic than just glyphosate. But glyphosate's already nasty. It was originally developed to clean pipes. It binds to metal. Glyphosate chelates the minerals out of whatever it touches. So it's taking it out of the soil. It's killing the healthy soil. It's not in the plants. If it's not in the plants, it's not being fed to the animals. The animals don't have it, the meat doesn't have it, and we are beginning to lack in minerals. It's just not available. There's so much glyphosate out there, and it's tying up these minerals. So it's just not good for our health. A lot of people believe that our country has the safest food safety standards. Well, those are slipping away every year. And actually, compared to other markets like Europe, we have a lot of products allowed in our foods that in Europe are either banned or labeled, and that includes GMOs. Now, the second major part of GMOs that are out there are called BT. BT plants, BT is in corn and cotton right now. BT is an insecticide. So in the lab, they insert the BT gene, and the plant, as it grows, produces BT from within. It's Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a naturally occurring bacteria in the soil, but they make it so it grows inside the plant so that when the bugs eat any part of the plant, or say the corn, their stomach explodes, it dissolves, and they die.
Kraft and PepsiCo today dropped $1.7 more million in this race because they don't want labeling, they don't want the truth. Yet they're doing it in 64 other countries. You know, they do it, they send it out. Companies are getting smart, so a lot of them are putting non-GMO because they know that's where the market is. But you know, if you look at the side of any box, there's all kinds of ingredients and labels. That's all it'd be, is another 2 lines, GMO. You know, it's got a GMO product in here. It's not a big thing, you know, when they do it on computers. Any of you are computer geeks know you drag a little symbol, you put it over there. They're going to print this whole side. It really isn't like they have a lot of Magdalenos, me, with little stickers and putting them on each box. It doesn't happen.
Another thing is, you know, there's a lot of crops soon to come on the market. So this isn't just about the ones we know about, like soy products, corn products, canola, and cottonseed. there's a lot of new products in the pipeline. And this includes genetically engineered salmon. This includes potatoes. Apples have just are on the verge of approval. And how are we supposed to know once these enter the food chain or in an agricultural valley where crops are being grown by side in a deregulated fashion, that that contamination isn't occurring, that these things aren't in the marketplace? Again, this is just common sense from our perspective. These new crops, these new novel crops coming on the market that have typically been engineered for herbicide resistance or some other benefit to sell the seed, are essentially, they should have to be labeled. Essentially, the new product coming in should bear that burden of disclosing what's going on. The other side of this argument says, choose organic or choose non-GMO verified. Well, that's convenient, but I think that it's a little bit, frankly, elitist to say that you should go buy organic. You can't always find organic products at your local corner store or your supermarket. Frankly, there's a lot of other things that go into organic besides genetic engineering. And so as a result, through often higher labor costs or other hands-on mechanisms that organic growers use, you may find the organic products are a little more expensive. For the same thing often with the non-GMO, there's not as much supply. But the reality is the burden should be on the new products coming into the market. That makes economic sense to us, that if you've got something new and novel, that's what should have to stand out. You shouldn't have to proactively go and get tested to prove that you're not something, as the non-GMO project label is right now. It's a stopgap in the near term, but ultimately what we should have is a mandatory labeling system for new products, these new GMO products that come on the market.
When children that have chronic health conditions are taken off of GMOs, they get better. At Moms Across America, we've been collecting testimonials and stories from mothers and families, and they've been writing to us. We have over 450 now, stories of families that say that their children have gotten better since their diet was cleaned up. This is very important because there is not a lot of science out there on the effects of GMOs on people. They have never been tested. Monsanto says it is the FDA's responsibility to approve or to prove the safety of these products. And the FDA says we trust Monsanto's testing. So they're both pointing to the other, and technically these have never been tested, these GMO products. How do you make a GMO? In a lab. It is not the same as a traditional hybrid. A traditional hybrid they have been making hybrids for hundreds or thousands of years. Farmers have been using crossbreeding to make things like the pluo, which is plum and I think apricot. Is that right?
Right.
So, or apples, different kinds of apples or different kinds of fruits. They've been doing that in the field through splicing and naturally crossbreeding. GMOs are created in the lab. They are made by the top six chemical companies that make GMOs are Monsanto, Dow, DuPont, Bayer, Syngenta, and BASF. Those are the top six. These are chemical companies. What they do is they go into a lab and they take the seed that's a really good hybrid. Say this hybrid has really high yield, or it is drought tolerant. Different seeds have different traits already that have been bred over the years, and they're already good hybrids. They take these hybrids and they alter them by inserting a gene into them that does what they want it to do. Right now, mainly, the only type of GMO that's out in our market are the types of GMOs that either resist herbicide or produce insecticide.
So we sort of view labeling these foods as sort of a free market approach. It's transparency in the marketplace, and it's really long overdue, and it just gives us a little bit more certainty that we can get some sort of oversight over what's going on in the food system. So it's the kind of thing where people can make informed choices when they have information. They can't make informed choices when they don't. Ultimately, consumers we think are going to be likely to select Oregon products when they have the option at any step of the way. Farmers are not going to get sued under this measure. In fact, the measure has a very clear exemption for farmers from getting sued, as long as they're being honest about what crops they're growing. The only way that a farmer would get sued, there's only two ways under this measure. One is if they actually process foods, include genetically engineered ingredients, and then lie about it. Mm-hmm. So that's one way that a farmer could get sued. The other way is if they grow a genetically engineered crop and then lie and say that they didn't, and then pass it off as not. So those are sort of, and then they could be, like anybody who makes a false claim, face a repercussion for that. Other than that, if a farmer accidentally gets contaminated, isn't aware of it, they're not going to get sued. And farmers really have nothing to fear ultimately from the legal provisions of this. I think it's been written very well to make sure that farmers are protected from legal repercussions, even in an environment where there's a lot of risk of cross-contamination. You can feel confident if you want to support farmers, you can do that by supporting Measure 92. We didn't bring this initiative to the people of Oregon. It feels to us like the biotechnology companies have really brought this fight to the small farmers of this state.
When you eat these foods, when you bite into these foods, you are getting traces of glyphosate and you are getting BT in your system. They told us that these things will pass right through our bodies and will not stay inside of us. But that's not true. Moms Across America, in fact, has run tests on breast milk and urine, and we have found levels of glyphosate in almost everyone that was tested, including in breast milk. And this is the thing that really shook us up, because they said that these materials cannot bioaccumulate, that they just pass through us and they don't harm us. But if it's in your breast milk, that's proof. It's going into your child. And glyphosate has been proven in studies to kill the gut flora of animals. There have been some animal studies where glyphosate has been shown to cause harm. It has been definitely shown to cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And it causes other health issues as well. So the glyphosate is not benign, as they say. More and more scientific studies are coming out, and I would say that there needs to be more science before we continue to consume it. And as far as the BT goes, they also said that this is naturally occurring in the soil, it only affects bugs, and it will just pass through our bodies. But that was also disproven by a study in Canada where the BT was found to be thriving in 100% of the women in their bodies and in their fetuses. Here's what happens in the lab when they create it. They take the corn seed, which is already a strong hybrid for whatever reason, for drought or yield. They add they add DNA to it from soil, maybe. In the case of BT, they add BT. Then they put E. coli into it, or a virus. They use a virus to spread that gene all the way throughout. Then they use a promoter, a bacteria that's a promoter that makes the gene turn on. Then they treat it with the neonicotinoids and the fungicides. Then they plant it. Then they spray it. That's what GMOs are. So you can imagine my joy when I found out that that's the practical aspect of GMO farming. Mothers like me, I would like to not buy them. And they say to mothers like me, well, you can buy organic, or you can buy non-GMO project verified. The problem with that, it is so unfair, because those foods are so expensive. Our tax dollars go to subsidize GMOs. Our tax dollars go to subsidize the less healthy food. And so for people who can barely afford their groceries, they can't buy organic. And that's just an unfair thing. I think that everybody should have the right to know if GMOs are in their food, no matter what they can afford for their grocery bill.
What they're going to do is they're going to fight for their profit. We're going to fight for our lives. It's our health. We're fighting for our lives. And you know why we're going to win? Because we take it personal. We're fighting for our lives and for our health. We're going to work with farmers. We're going to work with environmentalists. We're going to work with Republicans, with Democrats, middle of the road, no road. Anybody, we have to talk to everybody and convince them. This is not a partisan issue. It's our health issue. It's a people's issue. And we have a right to know. You know, when we fought on tobacco, how long did it take them? Saturated fats, how much sugar, how much caffeine, how much sodium you have in there. Every place along the way they fought. I always talk about, you know, those of us who've been around long enough on the Vietnam War, on equal rights, on LGBTQ, the beginning of the environmental movement, Martin Luther King, United Farm Workers, Nelson Mandela, people always ask, were you on the right side of history? Instead of just being on the right side of history, we can create history. You know, wouldn't it be great? 2014, they say, where were you on the labeling campaign that created the tsunami that went around the country? Is I was there, I called people, I got them to vote, I got everybody in, I gave them my time and my energy, and we created history. So know that we can create history, but to create history, we got to call. We don't have the money that they have. We got to call and make phone calls. When I'm not talking, I'm on the phone calling or emailing and asking people. We just have to keep repeating one argument that's true. We have a right to know what's on our food. We want to label what we put on our table. And if 64 countries can do it, and the companies that make the same products like these out here and ship them overseas can label it, and they've not increased the price, hasn't bankrupted any farmers, because they've been doing it now for years, we have that same right. But we need your help.